Yeah. Sorry. So Una's question, which is a very good point, and Luis and I are still scratching our heads at it too. Why is the Kona style of pruning have so much higher CLR infection compared to something like the topping or the umbrella, where you cut the tops and then all the growth that goes back down into the laterals and you get a really big bushy tree, right? And we know from the CBB work that they often had higher levels of CBB because they were really protected in that big bushy tree, right? And if you think about the conditions that CLR does well in, often shady and moist, and yeah, so the topping and umbrella style seems like it would actually promote CLR infection. And it's a really good question. We don't know why. Again, the sample sizes were pretty different. We only had, I think, 5 farms maybe that had umbrella style pruning. Again, Kona style is way more typical. Most farms are using that style. We don't know why yet. We need to sample more farms.
The other half of my question, though, is it just seems so much harder to spray underneath.
Yeah.
And they're all like that.
It could be that the farms were just managed better, like they most likely caught infection early on and then went in, with the proper fungicides. It could be a big part of it. I think overall, like I mentioned with the Kona style, a big problem is the trees are so darn big, right? They just get really overgrown and people want production, so they let a lot of verticals grow, and most farms aren't desuckering very often too. And we notice that those suckers in particular are like a magnet for CLR. They just go bonkers, right? I'm sure, like I see a lot of people nodding. We've all seen this, the keikis on the ground too seem to get really infected. So something about that new growth seems very susceptible, and that Kona style of pruning, especially when you've got more than 3 or 4 verticals and the trees are really bushy. They may not seem bushy like the topped trees, but they actually are quite bushy. They're dense. It's hard to get in there and spray, and then if you add in all the suckers that you let get in there too, it really inhibits good coverage and spraying. Do you want to add anything else to that? Luis is the pruning expert.
No. Thank you, Joe. I just tried to see what is the big picture regarding with the pruning. So, okay, thank you. I just tried to see the big picture, what's going on with the pruning system that we can use here in Kona. We had the traditional Kona style that it was worked several years ago, but after coffee berry arrived, this system didn't work too much because allowed the pests be all year long. Now, with the topping or umbrella or heritage system, I try in my own coffee farms, and the first result I saw was after you do, the first year the production is not too high, but the second and the third year the production is almost double than the standard. So, and the first year of production, you get very good results in controlling CBB, also the second year. But the next one now could be a little difficult for coffee berry borry. Now, in the median of this one, CLR arrived. So then I say, okay, let's go to see, keep doing this system to see what happened with the disease. And we find, the funny thing is, we find in some coffee farms that they are organic, we find that the CLR in those specific fields was relatively low, and the farmer was doing the similar control in all the plantation. With conventional Kona typical style and the topping, and also was pruning in block. So was doing about 3 difference. And we find that this one that is more bushy, more big, we find very low CLR. Now, why? Maybe because it's actively growing of the folia at the moment you cut the top, all the lateral start to grow. Could be one reason. So we are just in the first year. Now, in another coffee farm, we find the same result, but we know as well the farmer applied the systemic. So now we are not totally sure if the impact is because the system or if the impact in low CLR is because the systemic. So we are going to move from the second year, this right now, to see if the tendency is similar or if we are going to find any difference from the end of this season regarding the pruning system. But overall, we can say like the standard Kona style show high infection in comparison with the other systems. And one of the best that I think is stumping in block allowed us to control coffee berry borre plus reduce the CLR unless during the first year. That this is good in the point that you are going to reduce the disease, but also it's going to improve the coffee production of this field from the next coming season. But you need to protect the foliage to minimize any impact caused by the disease. So we are just in, this is ongoing project, so maybe we need 1 or a couple years to understand much better what's going on. Thank you.
Does that help, Una? I think a lot of people heard early on too that stumping was a good method to lower your CBB and CLR, and it is. But one problem we saw too, well, there's a couple problems. The older trees didn't recover so well, right, when you stump them. So you really need to leave a nurse vertical in there to help the tree recover during that rough period. But we also noticed that a lot of people that did the stump blocking didn't follow up. Like they stumped and then they left the field alone. But you need to go back in and monitor frequently because that new growth again is going to be really susceptible when it comes back, and you need to go in early and protect it. Yeah, so I hope that's helpful. Ongoing research. Hi, Carolyn.
I was just a little unclear with some of your research. You were testing the different products, and you would say, well, it would last for X number of weeks, 6 weeks, or 12 weeks. So did that mean you weren't doing multiple applications? I mean, so like you do with Untitled and then you...
Yeah, it was really to see how long a given product might provide protection. This is not the ideal situation. You don't want to wait 10 weeks to spray again. It was really just to see how long in given fields you actually would get protection. So we went in with the initial spray. There was an initial knockdown with oxidate to get rid of any existing infection in the field, and we made sure we started with a really low infection. Did the first spray right away. 4 weeks later, we went in with the second spray because a couple of those treatments were hitting that action threshold of 5%. So we went in with the second spray. And then after that, we just waited to see how long they actually would provide protection. And the copper products did provide quite good protection, the co-side up to 5 weeks and the badge up to 10 weeks.
So why wouldn't we wait as long as possible?
That's what we're hoping is to figure that out. We don't want to tell you to spray every 2 or 3 weeks. It's not economically feasible. In a perfect world, and you had all the labor and all the money, you would do that because, as Lisa said, that's what is recommended on the label, and that is how the products work the best. But we know that you don't have infinite amounts of money and labor, and so we're trying to figure out how big can we make that gap between sprays for you. So again, we're going to do that same project this season at 5 farms, but we're going to add in a couple more products. We're going to add in double nickel and Cafe DAC and Preaxor. Unfortunately, that ProBlad is the only translaminar product that is currently approved for organic farms, so we want to try the Cafe DAC just to see as a biostimulant. Lisa had that in her presentation too. It's not a fungicide, but it helps plant growth, and it might offer some protective properties, so we want to check that product out too. So again, we'll test a couple of coppers, a couple biologicals, the 2 translaminars, and the Cafe DAC. And we'll start out with those single product sprays, again, just to see how long they might provide protection. And then once we figure out what the best products are for each location, we'll pull one product from each of those groups and put it into rotation for the rest of the season. Because that's the ultimate goal, right? Is not just that you would spray one product every 2 or 3 weeks, but you want to have a nice rotation. Hopefully we can spread it out to 4 or 5 weeks. And eventually we're really hoping, like what other countries you see, they only spray like 4 times a year. So we're trying to figure out the best time to spray, the best products for your particular location, and how best to put those in a rotation program. Do you want to add anything, Luis?
Yes, I think we need to understand 2 aspects very important. One is if we use a single product, more in the case systemic, we are going to push like the CLR become resistant. So we don't want this happen. The another aspect is if we apply too many times some of the preventive like base copper, now we are going to get problem from the environment. And I concern about the people living inside the coffee area, because anytime we apply any product, doesn't matter, it could be low toxicity, there is a risk, human risk. So we want to establish a program that allows us to push as much we can the distance between one spray to the next spray, knowing the location, knowing the weather condition. I think it's not the same when you apply in the wet season, that is rain almost every day, in comparison with dry season, that maybe we can delay the application. So we need to look at this one, and as Melissa had mentioned before, the economic impact, we need to think about that. How much money we can input in the control of the disease, how long we can survive, apply too many times, too frequently, maybe 1 or maybe 2 seasons or maybe 10 seasons, I don't know. This is why this is a team work addressing different aspects. For now is put focus in improve the agronomic practice from your coffee plantation, put focus in the use the right preventive or systemic fungicides, and then the another people are working in the introduction of the coffee plants resistant to the disease. That it is the last goal, but because all of these requests from the agricultural department, we need to follow all of these kind of the quarantine protocols in order to get the right coffee variety that hopefully in few years we get the material, and in this way we don't need to apply too many times any of the products, maybe 1 or 2 times over the year, not just for control CLR, but also other disease. That is normal. But this is the goal. This is for now, we are testing single product, 1 or 2 sprays, and then rotation, because the goal is entering a rotation program until we get coffee plant resistant available to coffee growers to make substitution of the coffee plant. But also, this is one of the aspects many people concern. Also, we are testing what could be the quality of the coffee at the moment we test, in order to see, okay, the plant is resistant, but also the test is good.
Yes.
Have you been able to observe any negative effects for the coffee blooming or recently blooming plants and any protectors of fungicides?
So the question was, have we observed any negative effects on recent blooms in the coffee? We actually didn't start our fungicide trial until I think it was June, so there wasn't any flowering going on at the moment. I don't remember when your trial was started. May. Okay, so yeah, we haven't done any fungicide sprays at the time of flowering, and I think really the goal is to wait until after your major flowering period until you start thinking about doing your sprays. Anyone want to add anything to that? Okay. Yes.
Any thoughts on spread of CLR by virtue of feral coffee plants, and if so, shouldn't they all be destroyed inappropriately?
Yeah, so the question was, can we get CLR spreading from all of the feral coffee plants that we have around the island? This was one of the first topics I think that we started thinking about, because we knew from the CBB days that that was the hot topic, right? Well, my neighbor has an unmanaged farm and there's feral coffee along the road and it's causing CBB problems on my farm. So we knew it was going to be an issue with CLR too. I believe BISC actually is taking the lead on the feral coffee issue. USDA has not been working on that issue because we do not have funding within the SCRI grant to tackle the feral coffee problem. Anyone else want to? I think they definitely are contributing, and honestly, I think they may have contributed earlier in the initial infection, but now that it's everywhere and we have a lot of commercial coffee too, I don't believe that the feral coffee is our biggest problem in terms of spreading of rust around the island. They're a reservoir, certainly, yes, I definitely agree. We are seeing multiple cycles throughout the year of those feral plants losing almost all of their leaves. And so they're heavily defoliated. And so there is a good period of time where there's no rust really on those trees to be seen. But yeah, it's an issue and we definitely need to look into it. Do we know where BISC is at in terms of trying to look at eliminating feral coffee on the island?
I don't think BISC has the funding for that. We looked at it. They did it for CBB. I think it cost them in the neighborhood of $20,000 to remove about 10 acres of coffee, feral coffee. And when you think about there's hundreds of acres, it's just not really feasible, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's really detrimental to a coffee plant, and they have a hard time surviving multiple infections that are that heavy. I also want to point out that that was a big topic that we addressed with the area-wide CBB project. Everyone, when I first came on the project, said feral coffee is the problem. You need to look at that. We did the research, and we actually found that feral coffee was the least of our worries. It was actually the unmanaged farms. Even the abandoned farms weren't bad. And the reason is that those abandoned and feral farms, they have almost no production. And we know actually that CLR attacks trees that are high yielding. When they're in that heavy harvest, they're very susceptible to the rust, and that's when it really explodes. So I don't believe that the feral coffee, again, is our biggest issue in terms of being a CLR reservoir.
I think one aspect that we had to look is natural enemies, other kind of the parasite fungus. They could be attack the CLR that could be on the feral coffee around the island. So I think in both ways. One, the CLR could be killed over the time of those trees, but also natural enemies could be increased in those areas when we had feral coffee trees.
So I think we have time, unfortunately, for just one more question. Anything for Blaine or Luiz? Sorry.
I know.
I was going to ask, do you have a time frame on when there might be some good varieties? I mean, just kind of a ballpark, maybe?
Yeah, so I think, so I guess Una was asking what is the time frame for the varieties. So I think you can get some of the obatas at least that are available now. For the other ones, I think for the breeding ones or for the ones that we have to actually import, it'll probably be like a year or two, which is why we're hoping that the ones that are located already on this island will be available sooner.
Where would the
But
come from?
so HARC and I believe some of, I think Greenwell might have had some that they were distributing to some of their farmers. Yeah.
Any news on the wasp?
Yeah, so the parasitoid wasp for CBB. Yeah, so Peter Follett, who's leading that research, he and I will be going to Colombia at the end of April. Very excited for that. And we are going to go to Senna Cafe's compound and see actually what their breeding program is, both for CBB and for the parasitoid wasp. And I believe we're in the last stages of approval to be able to bring that wasp to Hawaii. And the plan is that we would rear it up at the volcano quarantine facility and prepare to do field releases the following season. And Luiz actually is probably going to be one of the main people working on that project as part of his PhD, so we're very excited for that because he actually has a lot of experience working with parasitoids in Colombia. So, anything else?
So we're waiting for the Board of Agriculture, HDOA's next meeting, and hopefully they're going to approve our import permit to bring in the wasp. And then our scientists are going to be learning how to mass rear that wasp by going to Colombia. Okay? So very excited about that.
All right, I'd like to thank our panelists, so let's give them a big hand for all their work. Thank you, guys.